Supervisor Safety Management System Training, Module 4. In this module, we're going to have a look at the general standards. This module will provide information about the general standards of Bryers contracting. They are a combination of safe work practices and safe job procedures and are found in Section 6 of the Safety Management System Manual. Due to a large amount of information, there will only be a single page with highlights from each standard. As a supervisor, it is your responsibility to review the entire standard and reference it during your work tasks. The Bryers training portal contains all current general standards, are available 24 hours a day for your convenience. Asbestos. Asbestos is the generic name for a group of naturally occurring minerals characterized by a fibrous structure that includes the following minerals: chrysotile, chrysolite, amosite, fibrous varieties of anthracite, tremolite, and actinolite. Before beginning work on an existing structure suspected of containing a hazardous material such as asbestos, an assessment and written report by professional consultants trained in the identification and treatment of hazardous materials must be obtained for the site. If workers discover a material they believe to be asbestos, they must cease work immediately, leave the area, and notify their supervisor upon notification of the possible presence of a hazardous material. Boom truck. Make sure all workers, particularly spotters and inexperienced workers, are instructed to stand clear of the outriggers while they are being lowered. Ensure that outriggers are down and on firm ground before using the lifting unit. Before operating the boom truck, consult the load chart to ensure the unit has the capacity for loads to be lifted. Before lifting a load, ensure that you make straight pulls. Before lifting a load, ensure that the boom and load lines form a straight line to prevent side pulls that can damage the boom and/or tip the unit over. Do not modify the machine or add attachments unless they're manufacturer approved. Keep the load close to the ground wherever possible. Maintain at least 10 feet safety area between the crane tip and any obstructions or power lines. Ensure that maintenance and lubrication is done according to manufacturer specifications, and never reposition or move the unit when the boom is in the raised position. Chainsaw. Use the proper personal protective equipment as set out by the manufacturer and by provincial legislation. Inspect the chainsaw before starting or using it. Ensure that the guide bar is tight and the chain fits snugly without binding. Ensure that the chain brake is functioning properly and adequately stops the chain. Make sure the chain is sharp, has the correct tension, and is adequately lubricated. Ensure that the chain is clear of obstructions before starting the chainsaw. Do not use a damaged chainsaw. Do not use the chainsaw for cutting above shoulder height. Do not fuel a chainsaw when it is running or hot. When starting a chainsaw, do the following. Hold the chainsaw firmly on the ground. Point the chainsaw away from your body and nearby obstructions. Pull the starter cord with a quick, sharp motion. Cleaning solvents. Cleaning solvents are used to clean tools and equipment, and care must be taken to protect workers from hazards that may be created by them. Wherever possible, the solvents used should be non-flammable and non-toxic. Use non-flammable solvents for general cleaning. Be familiar with the toxic hazards of all solvents before use. When flammable liquids are used, make sure that no hot work is permitted in the area. Store flammable materials and solvents in special storage areas away from heat, spark, flame, and direct rays of the sun. Provide adequate ventilation where solvents and flammable materials are being used. Follow all personal protective equipment direction from the SDS for the solvent used. Where needed, use the following. Use goggles or face shields to protect the face and eyes from splashes or sprays. Use rubber gloves to protect the hands. Wear protective clothing to prevent contamination of clothing. And when breathing hazards exist, use the appropriate respiratory protection. Combustion engine indoors. When combustion engines are used in indoor environments or confined spaces, there is always a risk of elevated carbon monoxide levels, which can be deadly. Carbon monoxide is a product of incomplete combustion. It is a toxic, odorless, invisible gas that produces adverse effects by interfering with the ability of the blood to carry oxygen to tissues and the brain. The symptoms associated with CO poisoning are following: headache, nausea, feeling of intoxication. Nitrogen dioxide is also very toxic and can be encountered in welding operations as well as in the combustion of fuels or nitrogen-containing materials. NO2 emissions are also a serious environmental concern because of their role in smog formation. Commercial vehicle operation. Bryers contracting requires that all our employees who will be operating company-owned vehicles or driving personal vehicles on company business to submit a current copy of their driver's abstract dated within 15 days of submission. The abstract shall cover the previous 3 years. Annual reviews shall be done on active low-risk company drivers at the expense of Bryers Contracting. Employees rated above low will be responsible to supply abstracts at the determined intervals. Employees are required to inform the company corporate safety department when changes to their driving history are expected, including violations obtained in their personal vehicles. Drivers operating company vehicles will comply with all transportation safety laws as required. Any components identified as needing repair and/or maintenance will be maintained and/or repaired as required. The records documenting the repairs and/or maintenance will be retained in the appropriate vehicle file. Compressed air tools. Follow manufacturer's instructions. Use only quick disconnect pressure release type hose connectors with a safety chain or cable. Wear personal protective equipment such as eye protection and a face shield. Before disconnecting the hose or changing tools connected to the hose, ensure that the air pressure is off and the line pressure is relieved. Ensure workers in the area are made aware of or have restricted access to the hazard area where compressed air is being used. Check hoses on a regular basis for cuts, bulges, or other damage. Ensure that defective hoses are repaired or replaced. Make sure that a proper pressure regulator and relief device is in the system to ensure that the correct pressure is maintained. Use the correct air supply hose for the tool or equipment being used, and do not use compressed air to blow dirt or debris from clothing or skin. Compressed gas cylinders. Compressed gas cylinders are attached to equipment used for cutting, welding, and heating. Compressed gas cylinders may contain acetylene, oxygen, or propane. Cylinders containing oxidizers shall be stored in racks at a minimum of 7.5 meters or 25 feet from occupied buildings. These cylinders shall be separated from fuel gas cylinders, hydrocarbons, or other combustible materials by a minimum of 6 meters or 20 feet, or by a non-combustible barrier at least 1.5 meters, 5 feet high, having a fire resistance rating of half an hour. Storage racks shall be capable of supporting cylinders in an upright position, chained or otherwise secured, and shall have sound flooring. No open flames, no smoking, no sparks. Signs shall be posted in the area. Fire extinguishers must be located no closer than 7.62 meters or 25 feet and not further than 22.86 meters or 75 feet from cylinder storage area. Flashback devices shall be installed at both the regulator and torch end of all oxy-fuel gas systems used for cutting or torch welding. Concrete grinding. Concrete is ground to finish concrete forms, finish concrete surfaces, and remove unwanted concrete protrusions. Also, drilling holes into vaults and other concrete activities. All workers involved in concrete grinding must have proper respiratory equipment that meets the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health and/or Canadian Standards Association standards, have it fit tested, and be trained in its use and maintenance. If required to wear respirators, workers must be clean-shaven in accordance with applicable provincial legislation. The 3 basic options for controlling dust are following. Control the source of the dust. Control the path of the dust between the source and the worker. Control the dust at the location of the worker. Confined space entry and monitoring. Confined space means a restricted space which may become hazardous to a worker entering it because of an atmosphere that is or may be injurious by reason of oxygen deficiency or enrichment, flammability, explosivity, or toxicity. a condition or changing set of circumstances within the space that presents a potential for injury or illness, or the potential or inherent characteristics of an activity which can produce adverse or harmful effects within the space. Some examples of a confined space: tanks, vessels, towers, heaters, silos, aerial coolers, bins, hoppers, tank cars, ventilation or exhaust ducts, and sewers. An excavation is considered to be a confined space under certain circumstances. For example, if there is limited access or egress, or the quality of the atmosphere cannot be guaranteed. A dike that is more than 1.5 meters deep and the atmosphere cannot be guaranteed. Tower or vessel skirts, under trailers with skirts, false ceilings because of restricted access or egress, must be considered a confined space. Others, such as pipe racks, utilidors, and compressor fan housings and hoardings. All workers who are required to enter a confined space will be trained in confined space pre-entry and entry procedures and rescue awareness, and must provide proof of training prior to that entry. Based on client recommendations, this training may need to be OSHA approved. Coring. Coring is used in new construction to make openings in concrete to accommodate pipes where sleeving was not done or if plans have been revised. It is used in renovation work to make openings to change pipes or add new ones to the system. Obtain and consult as-built of the area to be worked on. Identify present lines and sources. Do a task hazard assessment. Set out proposed drill core locations. Where possible, use a locator or X-ray to pinpoint existing lines. Erect warning signs to advise of the operation. Ensure dust slurry barriers are in place to protect all equipment from damage. And ensure PPE requirements are being followed, including eye protection, steel-toed boots, hearing protection. Face shield may be required if coring overhead. Cranes and hoisting equipment. Many types of cranes and hoists are used at Bryers Contracting for lifting and moving materials. Bryers is to maintain a safe workplace for its employees, therefore it cannot be overemphasized that only qualified and competent individuals shall operate these devices. Crane and hoist operators are responsible for operating hoisting equipment safely, conducting functional tests and inspections prior to using the equipment, selecting and using rigging equipment appropriately, having a valid operator certificate on their person while operating cranes or hoists, maintaining the equipment logbook and the operator's logbook. Operators shall comply with the following rules while operating cranes and hoists. Do not move a load over people. People shall not be placed in jeopardy by being under a suspended load. Also, do not work under a suspended load unless the load is supported by blocks, jacks, or a solid footing that will safely support the entire weight. Ensure that the rated load capacity of the crane's bridge, individual hoist, or any sling or fitting is not exceeded. Note the weight of the object being lifted. Critical lift. Critical lift means a lift that any lift in a confined space or restricted area where the load or any part of the structure will come within 24 inches of the crane boom and has the potential for getting closer. Any lift that may present a real or significant risk to existing structures or operation processes. Any lift over live or operating equipment processes. Any lift within the approach limits of live electrical power lines. Single crane lift where the load will represent more than 75% of the manufacturer's rating chart at the working radius for a mobile crane. Multi-crane lifts involving 2 or more cranes lifting the same load simultaneously, or any tailing crane operation. Any lift where the weight of the load is unknown, or where special lifting rigging equipment or non-standard crane configuration is used. Any crane lift where the crane is set up over underground installations. Critical lifts require an engineered lift study prepared and stamped by a professional engineer. Defective tools. Defective tools can cause serious and painful injuries. If a tool is defective in some way, do not use it. Be aware of problems like chisels and wedges with mushroomed heads, split or cracked handles, chipped or broken drill bits, wrenches with worn out jaws, and tools which are not complete, such as files without handles. To ensure safe use of hand tools, remember, never use a defective tool. Double check all tools prior to use. Ensure defective tools are red tagged and taken out of service, and inform your supervisor. Demolition. Demolition is the destruction or removal of material to make way for new construction. Demolition is inherently dangerous and must be left to competent workers. Planning and supervision are of extreme importance. Before any work starts, supervisors and workers must know if any dangerous substances are in or around the area that are being demolished. For example, asbestos, lead paints, flammable liquids, unidentified drums or packages, live electrical, live plumbing, or live sprinklers. Before demolition is started, a thorough hazard assessment of the site must be carried out. Electrical safety. Only competent and qualified electrical personnel are to work on, build, construct, alter, install, repair, service, or maintain electrical equipment and systems. Only competent and qualified electrical personnel may enter electrical rooms, enclosures, cabinets, and/or other areas containing live electrical parts and components. Wires shall be covered wherever they are joined, such as outlets, switches, junction boxes. Equipment connected by flexible extension cords shall be grounded either by a 3-wire cord or by a separate ground wire. Portable electrical equipment used outdoors or in wet, damp locations shall be equipped with an approved CSA certified ground fault circuit interrupter. Flammable or combustible material shall not be stored near electrical equipment. Excavation and trenching. Disturbing the ground. Ground is disturbed if a work operation or activity on or under the existing surface results in a disturbance or displacement of the soil, but not if the disturbance or displacement is only a result of routine minor road maintenance, agriculture cultivation to a depth of less than 450 millimeters or 1.46 feet below the ground surface over a pipeline, or hand digging to a depth of no more than 300 millimeters or 0.98 feet below the ground surface, so long as it does not permanently remove cover over a buried facility. When material is removed from an excavation or trench, all spoil piles must be located no less than 1 meter away from the edge of the excavation. The slope of the spoil pile adjacent to the excavation is at an angle of not more than 45 degrees from the horizontal. All loose materials must be scaled and/or trimmed from the spoil pile to avoid material falling into the excavation or trench. Explosive powder actuated tools. An explosive powder actuated tool, often generically called a Hilti gun or a ramset gun after the manufacturing companies, is a type of nail gun used in construction and manufacturing to join materials to hard substrates such as steel and concrete. They use an explosive powder charge to propel fasteners. The general rule is to start with the weakest cartridge and increase the load number one at a time to reach the required penetration. Explosive actuated tools shall be designated so that 2 separate actions are required before it will fire: pressure against the surface of the material and the action of the trigger. Never to press the muzzle against anything but the surface of the material to be fastened. The tool must be fitted with a proper small guard. Powder actuated tools shall not be used where studs are to be driven into surface hardened steel, cast iron, glazed brick or tile, marble, granite, or similar brittle materials. Fall protection. This standard is intended to make sure that all reasonable precautions are taken to ensure the health and safety of personnel working above the height of 3 meters or 10 feet from a temporary work area, 1.2 meters or 4 feet from a permanent work area, or where there is a possibility of unusual risk of injury if a worker falls from any height. A written fall protection plan is required as part of the risk assessment for the job at hand when working at heights of 10 feet or greater. Only properly trained and qualified personnel must operate elevating platforms and aerial devices. Equipment must be operated in accordance with manufacturer standards. All workers must be trained in the fall protection plan and the safe use of the fall protection system before allowing the worker to work in an area where the fall protection system is to be used. Any worker expected to be involved in performing a rescue must be identified on the rescue plan and have competency-based training in the proper techniques and use of equipment for the rescue system. Flagging. All workers involved in flagging operations must have formal training from a certified and competent flagging instructor. High visibility vest, safety glasses, steel-toed boots, and a hard hat must be worn by the flagger at all times. A flagger must also have a clean stop, slow paddle, logbook, and whistle at all times. Additional PPE such as hearing protection should be worn as required. In a multiple flagger situation, each flagger should have a two-way radio or other equally effective communication device. Ensure required signage and traffic cones are available before commencing work. H2S awareness. Hydrogen sulfide gas is toxic and deadly at very low concentrations. You cannot see it or rely on your sense of smell to detect it. Bryers contracting policy is to use breathing apparatus when the working atmosphere contains more than 10 ppm of H2S. Personal monitors alarm at 10 ppm. When the monitor alarms, evacuate to a safe area and let your supervisor know immediately. Workers must not be exposed to concentrations exceeding 10 ppm at any time. Do not attempt to re-enter the area without breathing apparatus. All employees working on sites where risk of H2S is present must be adequately trained. Handheld circular saw. Approved safety equipment such as safety glasses or a face shield is to be worn. Always inspect the tool before use, including electrical components. Where harmful vapors or dusts are created, approved breathing protection is to be used. The proper sharp blade designed for the work to be done must be selected and used. The power supply must be disconnected before making any adjustments to the saw or changing the blade. Before the saw is set down, be sure the retracting guard is fully returned to its down position. Both hands must be used to hold the saw while ripping. Ensure all cords are clear of the cutting area before starting to cut. Before cutting, check the stock for foreign objects or any other obstruction which could cause the saw to kick back. And when ripping, make sure the stock is held securely in place. Use a wedge to keep the stock from closing and causing the saw to bind. WHMIS. WHMIS is a chemical product identification and labeling system designed to help Canadian employers identify, recognize, and control the hazards associated with harmful materials and substances. Hazardous materials are known as controlled products. These three areas covered by WHMIS legislation are labeling, safety data sheets, worker education program. All Bryers employees who work with or near hazardous employees will be trained in WHMIS, including the purpose and importance of the information on the labels and SDS, and in the handling and storage and disposal of hazardous waste. Formal training will consist of CSTS 09 training, as well as supplemental WHMIS 2015 updating. Hearing conservation. Noise-induced hearing loss has been linked to one-time exposure, intense impulse sounds such as explosion, or by continuous exposure to loud sounds over an extended period, such as the noise generated in a woodworking shop. Recreational activities that can put you at risk for noise-induced hearing loss include target shooting and hunting, snowmobile riding, listening to MP3 players at high volume through earbuds or headphones, playing in a band, and attending loud concerts. Harmful noises at home may come from sources including lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and wood and metal working tools. All employees working in areas with noise levels at or above 85 decibels, where engineering controls are not practical, will wear proper hearing protection while in the area. Employees shall be required to wear earplugs when operating tools or equipment which creates high noise level areas. Joint Health and Safety Committee Terms of Reference. The duties and functions of the committee. Identify situations that may be unhealthy or unsafe for workers and advise on effective systems for responding to those situations. Consider and expeditiously deal with complaints relating to the occupational health and safety of workers. Consult with workers and the employer on issues related to the occupational health and safety and occupational environment. Make recommendations to the employer and the workers for the improvement of the occupational health and safety of workers and compliance with the regulations and monitor their effectiveness. Advise the employer on proposed changes to the workplace or the work processes that may affect the health and safety of workers. Ensure that incident investigations and regular inspections are carried out as required by the regulation. Participate in inspections, investigations, and inquiries as provided by the regulation. Ladders. All ladders to be CSA approved and correct for the type of work. Keep both metal and wooden ladders away from electrical sources. Ladders used near any energized electrical equipment must be constructed of a non-conducive material. Place extension or straight ladders on a firm level surface at a slope of 4:1. Extension or straight ladders must extend 1 meter or 3.3 feet above the support point and be firmly secured at top. Visually inspect the ladder for damage prior to use. The use of damaged ladders can be dangerous. Do not overreach. Keep your belt buckle between the side rails. Do not misuse. Ladders are for use by one person at a time. Do not climb, stand, or work above the third rung from the top of the ladder. Never climb above the support point. Do not use ladders in high winds, and do not walk or shift the ladder while standing on it. Lightning protocol. Remember this simple lightning safety message and teach it to others. If you can see it, flee it. If you can hear it, clear it. No place outside is safe. Avoid being near any metal objects, including fences, machinery, and electrical equipment. Avoid solitary trees. Avoid water. Avoid open fields. Avoid small rain, sun shelters, and gazebos. Avoid using the telephone or touching appliances. When is it safe to go back outside? Waiting a minimum of 30 minutes from the last observed lightning or thunder before resuming outdoor activities will ensure the storm has passed and that the threat of lightning has subsided. Lockout-tagout. The purpose of a lockout-tagout safe work procedure is to prevent injury and death caused by accidental startup of a machine other than a power tool during servicing, maintenance, testing, or adjusting of that machine. Before any worker undertakes the maintenance, repair, test, or adjustment of a machine other than a power tool, Bryers Contracting or any other contractor working for the company shall ensure that energy sources are turned off, disconnected, and/or released, then locked out and tagged out, remaining locked out during that activity. If not, doing so would put the worker at risk. Bryers Contracting prohibits any maintenance work being conducted while the equipment is still in operation. All authorized workers who are involved or affected by lockout-tagout shall be trained in this application. They must be competent to apply lockout-tagout and to de-energize or isolate that particular equipment. Manual lifting and ergonomics. Plan your lift. Assess the load. Plan your move. Let others know what you are going to do. Plan where you are going to set your load down and how to set the load down. Place your feet properly. They should be shoulder width apart and one foot should be slightly ahead of the other. Point the front foot in the direction in which you will be moving the object. Bend your knees and keep your back straight as you squat down. Don't let your knees touch the ground. Get a good grip on the object. Tighten your stomach muscles and take a deep breath. Keep your shoulders back, buttocks up, and back straight. Now lift up using your legs to carry most of the weight. Keep the load close. The closer the load is to your body, the less force it exerts on your back. Keep your back upright. Don't add the weight of your body to the load. Avoid twisting as it can cause an injury. Overhead power lines. An overhead power line is a structure used in electric power transmission and distribution to transmit electrical energy along large distances. It consists of one or more conductors suspended by towers or poles. Where practical, designate the area 15.24 meters or 50 feet parallel to each side of the power line as a critical area where no construction equipment can operate unless accompanied by a watchman. When you have line voltage of 0 to 5,000 volts, your additional clearance must be 2 meters or 6.5 feet. 5,000 to 50,000 line volts be 3 meters or 9.8 feet. 50,000 to 250,000 4.5 meters or 14.8 feet. Over 250,000, 6 meters, 19.7 feet. If the voltage is unknown, it'd be 7 meters and 23 feet. Under direct supervision of a qualified utility employee, you can bring your boom within 650 millimeters of an overhead power line. Do not overlook clearance from construction activities, spill piles, etc. Personal protective equipment. All personnel protective equipment must be inspected before each use. Personnel protective equipment with visible signs of damage must be turned in to be destroyed. Personal protective equipment which has been involved in an incident must be immediately removed from service and new equipment issued, regardless of visible damage. Bryers Contracting minimum standards for personal protection equipment are head protection, safety glasses which must have side shields, hearing protection must be worn when in areas where decibel levels exceed OHS exposure limits. CSA approved protective footwear is a condition of entry onto any Bryers worksite and must be worn when work is being done. When there is a danger to your hands and the protection indicated does not increase the safety risk, protection suitable to the task must be worn. Full body safety harness and shock absorber lanyards attached to individual lifelines for each worker must be worn when required for fall protection. Pneumatic tools. Allow only authorized, trained, experienced workers to use pneumatic nailing and stapling tools. Inspect a pneumatic tool before connecting it to the air supply. Check any hose for cuts or bulges and replace any hose found to be defective. Hold pneumatic tools used for nailing and stapling against the work surface before pulling the trigger. Do not disengage or override safety features. Do not hold operating triggers in the on position while moving between work positions. Do not secure operating triggers in the on position under any circumstance. Disconnect the air supply before making adjustments or repairs to the tool. Do not point the tool towards yourself or others, regardless of whether it is empty or not. Do not use compressed air to blow debris or clean dust from clothes. And do not lay hoses across walkways. Power tools. A power tool is a tool that is actuated by an additional power source, a mechanism, other than the solely manual labor used with hand tools. Inspect power tools, power cords, and electrical fittings for damage prior to each use. Repair or replace damaged equipment. Do not use a defective power tool. Do not wear gloves, loose fitting, or jewelry while using revolving power tools. Switch power tools off before connecting them to a power supply. Do not use electric tools in wet or damp locations unless the tool is connected to a ground fault circuit interrupter. Ensure that power tools are properly grounded or are double insulated. Keep power cords clear of tools during use. When possible, suspend power cords over aisles or work areas to avert stumbling or tripping hazards. And do not carry electrical tools by the power cord. Powered mobile equipment. There are various types of powered mobile equipment such as aerial work platforms, lift trucks, loaders, skid steers, graders, and tractors. Only competent workers may operate powered mobile equipment unless they are under the direct supervision of a competent worker for purposes of training. All operators shall inspect the area adjacent to the machine prior to starting. All equipment operators and truck drivers will check that the machines and hauled equipment have sufficient clearance under electrical power lines. Air pressure shall be at a safe level before starting out. Air tanks should be checked and bled regularly during freezing conditions. Operators will periodically check for fractures and other evidence of metal fatigue on all equipment. All operators of rubber-tired equipment will regularly check the tires of their machines for cuts, gashes, and low air pressure. All deficiencies or equipment in need of repair shall be reported to the foreman or the mechanic. Defects which may affect the safe operation of the equipment must be repaired before the equipment is operated. A fatigued or tired operator shall not attempt to operate his machine and will inform his foreman of his condition. Retractable knives. Prior to setup and use, a stop card should be completed to assess and control all hazards. Include gloves as part of the PPE for any task requiring a retractable knife. Inspect the tool prior to use to ensure it is not broken or have broken pieces. Extend the blade only as far as the backing so the blade will be supported. If you need a longer length, a different tool will be required. Once the blade is in position, turn the blade tensioner so the blade will not move while in use. Always cut away from the body, never towards yourself or coworkers. Cut in straight lines, never use sideways motions. Ensure the blades you use are sharp. Once your task is complete, unlock the blade by loosening the blade tensioner, retract the blade inside, and then retighten the blade tensioner. Never leave a piece of blade extended, even if walking away for a minute. Always double check blade position before putting tool into a pocket. Silica. Silica is a naturally occurring mineral found in concrete, grout, masonry block, and other common materials such as sand, granite, aggregates, stone, shale, clay, slate, and sandstone. Silica can become a serious occupational hazard when silica dust is created in a workspace without proper PPE and other control measures in place. Silica is a suspected human carcinogen, and with prolonged exposure can cause permanent lung damage and sometimes fatal lung disease called silicosis. Any worker that generates dust while working with sand, granite, aggregates, stone, shale, or concrete has the potential to harm workers. Tasks such as sweeping of dry cement or concrete, and drilling, chipping, abrasive blasting, or cutting masonry block, bricks, cement board, concrete, and mixing concrete, grout, and mortar have the potential to harm workers. Temporary work platforms. All scaffolds must be erected, used, maintained, and dismantled in accordance with manufacturer's specifications. Workers shall be provided training on the safe use of temporary work platforms. Prior to use, temporary work platforms shall be inspected and tagged. If defects are found, they are not to be used and reported to supervision. All scaffolds should be equipped with 3/8 to 1/2 inch rope for hauling material and tools to the working deck. Rolling scaffolds shall not exceed 3 times the dimension of the base, have securely attached outriggers on both sides of the scaffold if used to attain the 3:1 ratio. Have wheels equipped with locking devices that are used whenever personnel are on the scaffold. Not have personnel on the scaffold when it is in motion. Be used on a surface that are firm, level, and free of hazards that may cause the scaffold to topple. A scaffold that is mounted on pneumatic tires while the scaffold is being erected, used, or dismantled. Tiger torch. The tiger torch operator must be trained in the proper lighting and use of tiger torches. Make sure an adequate fire extinguisher is nearby when a tiger torch is used. Do not use tiger torches for heating work areas or thawing lines and equipment. Ensure that the propane bottles are properly shut off after use. Make sure that the fuel lines have regulators. And secure propane bottles in an upright position. Utility locates. Utility location is the process of identifying and labeling public utility mains that are underground. These mains may include lines for telecommunication, electricity distribution, natural gas, cable television, fiber optics, traffic lights, street lights, storm drains, water mains, and wastewater pipes. All utilities must be properly located prior to performing any ground disturbance activity. The process for locating and marking buried utilities will be conducted in accordance with best practices developed in the Common Ground Study and supported by the Common Ground Alliance. Ground disturbance is defined as any work, operation, or activity that results in the disturbance of the earth except cultivation less than 450 millimeters or 1.5 feet in depth, or a disturbance of the earth less than 300 millimeters or 1 foot in depth, provided it does not reduce the earth cover over a buried pipeline to a height less than that provided when the pipeline was installed. Welding, cutting, and burning. Check area for flammables. Ensure you have a proper, fully charged fire extinguisher at hand. Ensure safe blocking of equipment and material being welded. Set up welding screens. Ensure proper ventilation. Set up welding cables to avoid tripping hazards. Bottles must be secure and upright. Recently welded or flame cut work must be marked hot or have an effective guard in place to prevent contact by a worker if a worker not involved in the work is likely to enter the area.